I naively thought that I could just make a that I could just take all of the same level design and everything from the original Triple Trouble, stick it in better graphics, and call it a day. And I'm like, this is gonna be easy. I'll get this done in like a year. So anyway, here we are 5 years later, and I just finished the game. I wanted to make a game. I wanted to finish a game because fan games have that stereotype of never getting finished. I set out to do that. I did it. I'm like, whew, we're done. And it's just kind of funny that people are like, that's great. So when's the Fang DLC coming? I'm like, the Fang DLC is not coming.
Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. And today's episode of Breaking In, I have got a very special guest with me. His name is Noah Copeland. He is the designer, creator, and whatever you want to call it, of the recently released fan game of Sonic Triple Trouble. Noah, thank you very much for coming on and speaking with me and addressing a lot of questions which I'm going to throw your way.
My pleasure.
Honestly, it's been a great pleasure playing through this game, and I know so many people out there are loving it. And I've got loads of questions to ask you just from myself. And I mean, you know, the first one really is, I think, one that people might want to know about is, how long have you been a Sonic fan for?
Pretty much as long as I've been playing video games. So probably since I was about 10 years old. I'm 29 now for reference, right? It was just, you know, like, I don't know if y'all had this in the UK, but there was a time when in the department stores, which you had kiosks that were demos where the controller was down here and the screen was like a mile high in the air and you had to like crank your neck to get it. I saw Sonic Adventure 2 on that and I have been in love ever since.
Wow. Yeah, no, I had a similar experience actually when I was growing up. We had a retailer here in the UK that used to do that too. And I think that was my introduction to Sonic 3, and it was probably just Sonic 3 actually at the time. But yeah, I remember that. So
nice. Yeah. See, I couldn't afford Sonic Adventure 2 because I didn't have a GameCube. So I went the next aisle over, and they had Sonic 3 for Windows 98 for like $10, which I could afford. So I got Sonic 3 right after that.
So you were 10 at that time, or around that time. So
yeah. This is like 2002 or something.
No, brilliant. So when you got into Sonic 3, what would you then say were the games that you were playing to death at that time? Whether it be Sonic or otherwise, what would you say would be your go-to game as you were growing up?
So Sonic 3 definitely played a huge part in that. But once I did finally get the GameCube, and I did get Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, and that is still a game that I periodically just go back to, and it's just like a warm blanket that you just stick on. It's definitely a game that, like, you know, people might play now, and they'll say, like, well, it hasn't aged that well, and they'll point out all these flaws with it. Whenever I say it's like my favorite game, people are like, oh yeah, well, what about this and this and this? And I'm like, I know it better than anyone. I don't care. I love that game so much. Like, I am smitten. It's just one of those. I think sometimes with games, we talk too much about graphics and frame rates and stuff like that. But really what's often important in a game is just the vibe. If you can't get into a game's vibe, it doesn't matter how good the mechanics are. You're just not into it. If you're into a game's, like, what it's trying to do, you can forgive a lot of stuff. And Sonic Adventure 2 is just one of those where the vibe is just 100% in tune with me. And I'm like, I will forgive every sin you commit, Sonic Adventure 2, because I love you so much.
I think I love to play Sonic Adventure 2 just to play City Escape over and over again. Obviously.
Best opening level of all time, man.
Yeah, I love that. I think I start to get into the weeds a little bit with the Knuckles. I mean, it depends how well you know it, obviously, but the Knuckles Emerald collection levels, I tend to like fall a bit like, I don't know. Some of them could be quite long.
Sticking point for some people, but I just love gliding around with those dreadlocks, man.
True, it's true. I mean, the music as well is brilliant. I loved Sonic Adventure 2 growing up as well. So it's
soundtrack.
Yeah, it's man. Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. Now, you know, I've got a Dreamcast version. I've got the GameCube version as well. I think the GameCube version I just pop in because my GameCube's more set up than the Dreamcast is. But yeah, I know, absolutely love Sonic Adventure 2. Were there any other games that you were sort of playing growing up other than Sonic?
Oh yeah, I was a big fan of. Obviously, I loved Mario games. Mario Sunshine's very cool to me. Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. Do you know that one?
Yeah, yeah.
Love me some Ty, dude.
I
don't
feel
think
like
Ty
that game
gets
got
enough credit.
recently I felt like it got recently re-released. Am I being wrong? I don't.
It
I felt
did.
like
I have it
yeah.
on Switch. Yes. Yeah, I
I was
was
gonna
there
say.
day one, baby.
No, that's brilliant. I'm actually going to give you a speed round of questions. And some of these you probably actually already answered, but we'll go through anyway. So, first off, favorite gaming console system of all time?
GameCube.
Okay. And then what's your favorite Sonic game of all time?
Sonic Adventure 2 or Sonic
Yep.
3, depending on my mood.
Okay. Favorite character after Sonic? So, Sonic's
Knuckles.
disqualified. Knuckles, yeah.
Yes.
Gotta love dreads. What's your favorite piece of Sonic merch? Do you have anything that you absolutely love that you have that's Sonic?
My Froggy shirt. It's just
Froggy
a green shirt with Froggy on it and nothing else. Doesn't say Sonic, just Froggy.
Does anyone ever ask you about this in the street? Like if you're ever wearing it? I mean, Sonic fans obviously know, but do people...
I actually like the people that like don't get it. That are just like, oh, there's a frog on your shirt. I'm like, yes, there is. Just don't explain it. It's
Yeah.
my favorite thing.
That's fair enough. Favorite Sonic music?
Man, anything by Crush 40. Sonic Adventure 2 is still the best. Live and learn, dude. All day.
I agree. Crush 40, brilliant. I want to go and see them live. I'm hoping to go to one of the 30th anniversary concerts. Be amazing. How do you rate the Sonic movies on a scale of 1 to 10? So the other two Sonic movies that have come out. What would you give them?
Sonic 2 is definitely above Sonic 1. I'll say that for sure. Sonic 1's maybe a 6, and I'll give Sonic 2 a 7 or 8.
Okay, brilliant. And have you got high hopes for Sonic 3?
I have no hopes for any Sonic movie ever. That's how I come away happy every time.
That's a good point. Go in with low expectations and you'll come out satisfied no matter what.
I never imagined in 1,000 years that it would work, and it did. So I'm happy.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Your favorite Sonic animation of all time? So, I mean, you know them all, so I probably won't have to list them, but
Maybe the Team Sonic Racing animations.
wow,
They're very cool.
yeah, okay. I wasn't. Yeah,
The Many Adventures is fun, but you get Shadow and other characters that you don't see otherwise in Many Adventures that you do get in the Team Sonic Racing
I
animations.
completely forgot about those animations, to be honest, until you mentioned it just then. It just completely slipped out of my mind, but I do remember them now. It kind of
Saw
it
them
was
live here in Austin at South by Southwest where they debuted them. So that also makes them extra special.
Yeah, now you've got good memories of them. I remember it was kind of like a wacky races type of thing where they're trying to stop each other. Yeah, no, I remember them now. No, okay, cool. Okay, then, well, now we know a little bit more about you. Let's dive right into the reason why we've got you, or why I've got you on the channel. So, do you have programming qualifications or X years of experience of programming and coding? How did you get into this?
I have no programming background. I do not have a computer science degree. Don't have anything like that. I really just sort of taught myself programming and just sort of set out to do this because I had worked on some Sonic fan games before as just a musician. Because, again, I don't have a computer science degree. I have a music degree. So I would help out with the soundtrack. But those projects would fall apart so quick. So what I wanted to do, I'm like, if this is ever going to get done, I'm going to need to take a lot of it in my own hands. You know, the old, if you want something done right, do it yourself. So I basically just sort of taught myself to program in the Game Maker language, which is a proprietary language. So it kind of stinks that it's not useful anywhere outside of the engine that I'm using, Game Maker. But, you know, just learn it the hard way by doing it.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, so what do you call yourself? Like a gaming programmer or?
So I like to... I would never call myself a programmer because I think if any real programmers saw my code, they might, you know, not be able to sleep that night. But
okay,
my school of thought on programming is if it works, it works, even if it's sloppy. I refer to myself more as like a game designer, or I like the term designer director. So in like film, for example, there's the term writer director, right? I always felt that if you're a writer and director, you have like total authorship of your movie, right? Because you can write the story, but then somebody else can take it and direct it and change all kinds of stuff with it. You can direct the story, but the initial idea came from somewhere else. But if you're like a writer director, you know, like, I don't know, Tarantino or Christopher Nolan or those type of people that sort of write their own stuff and then shoot it, I feel like it's your movie at that point, you know? And so the similar thing to me, as opposed to script writing, the analog for games to me, instead of script writing, would be the design of it. The level design, like the game design, because that's the bread and butter of what the player is actually doing. So to me, designer director is sort of that same equivalent of I am the author of this game, let's go type of thing. So in this case with Triple Trouble, that's the term I prefer.
Yeah. No, well, I don't blame you. So yeah, it kind of is an all-encompassing role, really, like you say, and it kind of gives yourself a lot more gravitas, and it's more realistic to like what you're actually doing. Well, you're overseeing a lot of things. So.
Yeah, to me that explains it well. If I just say like I made the game, it's like, well, what did you do? If I say designer and director, you're just like, okay, so basically that's a fancy way of saying you had your finger in every pie that there could have been. Which is, yes, that's the thing. Casting the vision, executing on the vision, having the whole big picture zoomed out view.
No, definitely. So, of all the Sonic games that you've played over the years, why choose Triple Trouble? Was there a particular reason for Triple Trouble in particular?
So funny story, right? So I said I'd worked on Sonic games, fan games previously, but they were all original games. They weren't remakes. So when I said I want to do one myself, I'm like, maybe I could remake a Sonic game, and that could be easier than making from scratch, right? Again, to bring up film, I was working on an indie film at the time. I was on set. We had finished shooting for the day, and somebody in the crew had a PlayStation 2 with them, and they brought out Sonic Gems Collection. And we started playing all the Game Gear games. We played Sonic Chaos, we played Triple Trouble, and I was looking at them like, here we go. These are games that I think could stand to have a Genesis-style remake. And I was kind of going back and forth between the two, but Triple Trouble to me stood out because it seemed like the game that would translate the best to Genesis. The level design seemed like it would translate the best, and it had that cool train sequence that's so awesome. Kind of ended up, so I was like, this is the one, let's do this, you know, and that's kind of where it started. Kind of ended up being a moot point about the level design, because I ended up redoing all the level design anyway, because it didn't translate, but I thought it would, so that sort of made me go to it. I naively thought that I could just make that I could just take all of the same level design and everything from the original Triple Trouble, stick it in better graphics, and call it a day. And I'm like, this could be easy. I'll get this done in like a year. So anyway, here we are 5 years later, and I just finished the game. So that obviously didn't work out, but that's kind of the funny...
A labor of love, for sure. I mean...
Labor of something, that's for sure.
So you had some background skills already. Did you learn anything in particular while you were making Sonic Triple Trouble? So whether that be programming or otherwise, audio or anything?
Yeah, I learned how to make a game, for starters. I've never done a game of this size, and so to do that was definitely a huge experience. That's sort of the overall picture, as I learned how to make a game, and then all the little subdivisions that sort of trickle out underneath that are stuff like programming. Again, I have no programming background, and if you want to make your own games but you're intimidated by programming, I did it and I hate programming, so you can figure it out too. Like and I think Game Maker is a very good tool for that. That's why I used it. It's so fast at rapid prototyping, right? So everything programmer. If you're a programmer, you may laugh at me, but I learned all about for loops and arrays and structs and JSON files, which are great for language translation, because we actually have the game translated into like 6 different languages just to have that available for more people. music-wise, I learned a lot about how the Sega Genesis works in terms of its music. Because one thing about the game, if you didn't know this, is it's incredibly faithful to sort of the limitations of the Sega Genesis. It's not actually made for Sega Genesis. It's kind of like Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight's not a game for the NES, but it looks and sounds like a game for the NES. It's similar with us, right? So I had to go back and look at and listen to a lot of Genesis music and learn about how the tricks they sort of used for things. They could only use 6 channels at one time on their FM synthesis. And one of the channels you could make samples on for drums. If you wanted to create a delay or echo effect, you literally have to take one channel and then duplicate it and then just move it over time-wise so that it creates an echo, which takes up an entire channel slot, right? So if you have your entire 6 channels occupied and you want to add an echo to it, you have to take something away. So it's sort of, you have to sort of think ahead like that.
Wow, so you're living with the limitations that they were living with back in the 90s with this. I mean, that must teach you so much of what you have to do as well. Wow.
Yes, they're self-imposed limitations, but I think to me it was essential to make it feel like a Sega Genesis game. You have to put those limits on. That's what shaped those games. That's why a Genesis game looks the way it does and why Super Nintendo looks the way it does. I think you could probably, anyone that's had experience with them, you could probably show somebody a Genesis game they've never played and a Super Nintendo game they've never played, and they could probably tell you which system each one was on just by the color palette and the feel of it. That nowadays we're kind of unlimited in what we can do with game hardwares. They're pretty much on parity with each other. Back in the day, the intricacies and idiosyncrasies of every particular console hardware sort of dictated what kind of games are on it, you know?
Like blast processing, a bit of Super FX.
Yeah, I saw a video recently. It was talking about how like Final Fantasy VII was great for the PS1 because it was disc-based, where something like Banjo-Kazooie was best for N64 because it was cartoony and cartridge-based, and just the way that the those different mediums sort of stream in content was good. Banjo-Kazooie, you could have a lot quick access to a lot of low fidelity things, where Final Fantasy you could have slow access to a lot of high fidelity things. That's why you have those scaping backgrounds and painted looking CG things, but you're walking around slowly and that type of thing. So to me, to get that Sega Genesis feel, I had to impose those limitations. There's never more than 64 colors on screen at one time in our game, because that's what you would do on the Genesis. And that's why I think it looks like a Genesis game, because you have to put that on you. I think that's a great tool for creativity, is those limitations, right? Because what you find is when you give yourself limits, you find yourself being able to sort of push up to those limits and just get the maximum sort of you're just able to squeeze every last drop out of those limitations, and you know that you're pushing on the edge of something, and that's more satisfying than just saying, I don't know, it's just infinity everywhere and there's no limits. You end up sort of getting lost in that limitless potential instead of making a hard to find sandbox to play in. These are the rules, these are the boundaries, these are the limitations. Let's work in that and see what comes out of that. And I think that's where the beauty comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. I think the reason why people treasure those games, the original games and retro games in general, were those limitations and what creators had to do within those limitations to, it kind of shapes the way the game is. So that is incredible that you've actually, like you say, self-imposed to do that.
Yeah, I saw a game jam the other day that was like, your game has to be like 64 pixels high, 64 pixels wide. That was the limitation, just to see what people come up with. It can get you thinking outside of the box when you have limitations like that.
Certainly. During the development of the game, did your community feedback help you fine-tune mechanics in terms of, telling you, oh no, you shouldn't be doing this like this, or, were they contributing to, were they saying things to you that would help contribute to that? And if so, what was the largest contribution that one of the community made?
So the thing about making a fan game, particularly like a Sonic game, is that you sort of have a gold standard to reference, right? You know what Sonic feels like on Sega Genesis or Mega Drive. So you know when it's not living up to that, right? So you sort of have that reference that you can keep going back to and sort of fine tune to, right? And so for me, that's what every sort of Sonic fan was expecting. So on my part, it was just making sure that I'm living up to that to the best I can. In terms of feedback, there was some interesting stuff after release. This is how granular Sonic fans can get, man. They're really into it, especially with such a thriving sort of ROM hacking, modding, and fan gaming community. Apparently, there is a thing called roll jump lock in classic Sonic games. Are you familiar with this at all?
I'm not. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you about roll jump lock. So this is a thing that if you spin dash, ching, 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 ching in a Sonic game, you let it rip and then you jump, you can't instantly change direction. You're sort of stuck in that momentum of the spin dash because the burst of speed is sort of got you headed in that direction. You can't instantly turn around. That's called roll jump lock. Except in Sonic CD, roll jump lock is disabled, and in Sonic Mania, roll jump lock is disabled. Apparently, I don't know if it's a very vocal minority or a majority. It's so hard to tell on the internet, but there is definitely a part of the Sonic fandom that believes very strongly that roll jump lock should always be disabled, and that Mania and CD got it right, and that it feels stiff otherwise. I didn't know this, but they sure told me pretty quickly after the game came out. I didn't know that it was too late. I found out it was honestly just a simple. It's not always this simple, but in this case, it was literally a simple line of code to change it.
Wow.
And I just threw it in the options. Was like, all right, this roll jump block thing, maybe it makes you look ignorant, but I didn't know what it was. But now I know. You can turn it off now. So there you go. For those that was a big deal, there you go.
That's amazing. But hey, look. I mean, that's huge feedback in one way. It definitely probably changes the way that certain players will play those games. And obviously CD has its fans for sure, but Mania definitely has its fans. And if people are more used to that, let's say more modern Sonic fans, I know that sounds weird to think about, but people who've been playing Sonic in the last 5 years or so, they might only know Mania. And so if they've played it like that and then they go to play Triple Trouble, I'd be surprised if there's someone who's played Mania and not played the originals. But hey, that's really cool.
Like I said, I always play Sonic 3, and Sonic 3 doesn't have it disabled, so that's just what I knew best.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I kind of am with you really. I didn't notice it to be a problem when I was playing it, so maybe I'm used to having roll lock jump on.
Yes.
And maybe if I go to play it with it off, I'd find it weird. But hey, I'm gonna definitely go and
I'm not gonna lie. It does feel better with it off.
Okay.
I just never really paid attention, but it's one of those things that now if you're cognizant of it, you're like, oh yeah, this.
Yeah, of course. I'm definitely I definitely go and play it in Triple Trouble. I'll go and play it in Mania, and then I'll go back to one of the other games and see where I've been missing out this entire time. So, there's quite a few names in the credits. So there's probably a couple of people that helped you and everything like that. So how did everyone come together to make this with you? Were they people that you knew, or did they find you? Like, what happened?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's really anyone that worked on Triple Trouble that I knew sort of before I started on the game, right? Sort of found them through this. Interesting story. Remember earlier when I said I think I could remake Triple Trouble in a year? It'll be really quick. Just give it better graphics. I really only have one artist that was with me the whole time. Her name's Dee. She goes by D Lightyears on Twitter. She's a wonderfully talented pixel artist from Germany. She had always wanted to remake Triple Trouble in a sort of 16-bit style. So she had already made sort of sprites and tiles in preparation for that remake. She doesn't have the technical skill of programming, so she was like, I'll just make the art and hope it happens. So I found that and I said, like, oh, this will speed things up considerably. The art's already done. Let's go. There was a lot of art still left to do, but there was definitely a head start. So I actually connected with her pretty early on, and I was like, we can do this. We can do this for real. You've got the art. I've got the other stuff that I can fake. Let's make it happen. Because again, this is my first time programming. So Dee was kind of with me the whole time, and we added more artists as we went on, but it was very intentional for me to keep the team small. Again, I said I'd worked on previous fan games, and this is sort of some I don't know. This could be some advice to some people who are working on smaller games and indie games and stuff. Is I found that if you get too many people involved early on, there's too many people there's a sort of a power vacuum, and everybody's sort of trying to fight for control and fight for the will of their will for what the game should be. And everyone's trying to steer the vision in, because the game is sort of shapeless, malleable void at this point, right? It doesn't have a solid, firm foundation. It's still being formed. So everybody's trying to form it in their image, right? So I did a demo in 2019, right? And it was really just me and D and maybe another artist, right? And that was important to me, because when you have a demo, it's an actually shaped, formed product that you can point to and say, see this right here? This is our vision. This is where we're headed. This is what we're going for. Now we can start to grow the team. Now we can get more people involved, because now it's been established what direction we're headed in. And I added more and more people the later it got into production. It took 5 years. In the last year, we maybe doubled our art team, because that really was the thing I needed the most help in. I was figuring out programming. I had the music down, but I did ask some other people to give their own spin on the Act 2 remixes, just so it'd be a different feel. And I was working really hard on getting that level design down, but I'm not a very good pixel artist. But there's a lot of wonderfully talented artists, especially in the Sonic community. So we doubled our art team in that last year just to get a lot of the remaining stuff out there and get that done. And I think it works a lot better when you've established that vision and that thing. A lot of them reached out to me. They said, hey, I've seen the game. I would like to be a part of this, which is good. That's what you want, as opposed to, hey, I need help. Can you come help me? And they're like, yeah, if I get to do what I want. But if they've already seen it and they want to be a part of it, then they're on board with the mission. Let's do this.
Certainly. I mean, so you mentioned that you've been doing it for 5 years. You started, this idea 5 years ago. How much of that did you have that game pretty much in shape before you then had to go and sort of fine tune it? So like you said, that last year you brought in some artists and, other people to help you on that. But even then, even if you'd released it 4 years ago, then let's say, or even 3.5 years ago, would it have been in a playable state? I'm guessing, yeah, but how much did it come through at the end, I guess?
Well, man, the hardest thing is the level design, 100%. Sonic level design is insane. If you've never done it, just just type in like Sonic 3 level map and just look at like the map, zoomed out view of a Sonic level. It looks like an anthill or like an ant tunnel. Like, it's just nuts. So many intersecting paths. It's very hard to do. And I think that's where I spent most of my 5 years on. Again, naively, I thought I could just take the existing level design, make it prettier and graphically, and call it a day. When I learned that doesn't work, because the physics are so different between 16-bit Sonic and 8-bit Sonic, you can't just smack him in there. I had to take the hard route and be like, okay, guess we got to sort of reinvent this. And it was sort of me trying to take the path of least resistance every time, just like, oh, I'll just change a little bit, before I was like, all right, I just got to study the heck out of Sonic levels, figure out what makes a good Sonic level, and just make that. And so, I mean, there are maybe within the last month of development is when I truly said I finished all of the levels. There was still a level here and a level there that still weren't done in terms of their level design. There were parts where I'm like, I've got the boss fight that it ends on, but I just need to get the part working up to it, all the rest of the level, right?
Well, I mean, it might be a spoiler alert if anyone hasn't completed the game, but you have a whole campaign to do now, right? With Fang or Nack or whoever.
Well, I don't think, to be honest, I'm not really interested in making a campaign for Fang or Nack at this point. I sort of threw him in as like an additional bonus that I thought would be fun. You could go back and play the levels in a sort of a non-canon way, right? But again, I've worked on this game for 5 years. I am burnt out on Sonic. I wanted to make a game. I wanted to finish a game because fan games have that stereotype of never getting finished. I set out to do that. I did it. I'm like, whew, we're done. And it's just kind of funny that people are like, that's great. So when's the Fang DLC coming? I'm like, the Fang DLC is not coming. So I try to take that in a positive light. It means that they liked the game and they want more, right? That's what that means. If nobody asked for the fan campaign, that's because they had a bad time. So it's a good thing people are asking for it and want more. But frankly, I've exhausted all of my ideas.
Do not blame you. I mean, what would you say you're most proud of then with Triple Trouble? Like, what was the thing that you're just glad that came together, and people have maybe commented on it with you and they've said, oh my God, I really love this part or that thing, or even you yourself. Like, what would you say you're most proud of with this game?
From a zoomed out perspective, the level design, 100%. Level design is one of those things where if it's not good, people think the game sucks, but don't necessarily know why it's not working. But I had people specifically send me a message and say, I can't believe the level design is as good as it is. But I'm just like, wow, that is the thing I was doubting the most the whole time, because it's just so hard to get that balance right for Sonic. So from a zoomed out perspective, I'm so proud of the level design and that people actually like the level design. From a more specific zoomed in view, it might be the Sunset Park train boss. Specifically, Sunset Park Act 3 is an entire level that takes place on a train. And you go on the train, off the train's on fire, you're getting shot at, you blow up the train. It's just everything thrown in. I looked at so many train levels from so many video games, and I just threw in every train level trope I can. I just wanted it to be as exciting as possible. So I think that's one that I'm most proud of.
I think the thing that people will be most sort of now wanting to know is how to make a game. How do they get into game making? So what would be the core disciplines that you would suggest that people need to make a game?
Right. So this might be a little bit of an obtuse answer, because I'm going to throw in some soft skills that I don't think get talked about enough. And that would be get good at learning and having perspective, right? Because those can get you where you need to go in any of the other disciplines, whether it be art or music or programming or that kind of thing. Again, I'm not a programmer. I've programmed a game now, so you could say, yes, you are a programmer, but I don't identify as it, because I don't think I'm that. I'm not using.
You've got a bit of everything, haven't you? You're a jack of all trades, is what we would say in the UK. Like,
yes.
You've got everything. You've got a little bit of everything.
Yes, because that's the skill I focused on, was learning, right? If you can learn to be a jack of all the trades, then you can get a lot more done than if you were just a really good artist. You got amazing art, cool. The art doesn't move unless you program it, right? The movement doesn't feel fun unless you design a level around it that's good. So understand that. I mean, have you ever heard of the 80-20 rule?
Well, maybe.
Well, let me explain it, just in case you and your audience hasn't heard it either. It's the idea that you get 80% of your results from 20% of your work, and kind of vice versa, right? It's sort of that, like, if you're working on something and you get about 20% of the way there, you've done 20% of the work, but to the audience, it looks like it's 80% of the work, the way there. In other words, you can go for the big wins, right? There's all kinds of little details you can get lost in, but the big picture stuff, you can get there pretty quickly if you just learn what's important and what sticks out the most, right? If you're like, okay, maybe this isn't the most intricate level ever created, but I know that going down this slide right here is fun. So use the slide, because the slide is fun. Get a lot of mileage out of the big wins and like the big picture stuff, right? Understand that creating and finishing are two separate skill sets. creating goes on forever, but finishing is the art of saying, this is done now. And I think a lot of people have that first skill set, but don't get very good at the finishing part. So you need to be able to learn to create, and you need to be able to have perspective to know when to finish. And that to me is sort of like the core discipline. It goes back to making really fun, that applies also to the game itself, making really fun like level design and games. Because again, if the art's really good, but it's not very fun to actually play it when the controller's in your hand, it really doesn't matter. So focus on the stuff that matters the most. Teach yourself that, and that can take you a long way.
Brilliant. I guess then the next step is so anyone who wants to do any of these things, whether it be audio, design, coding, programming, what do they then do to find either a project that they can work on with somebody else? Like, where do they go? I know the internet's obviously one thing, but like, where on the internet would they go, or how do they get involved in starting that game themselves or working with another creator?
So for finding other people, that's definitely a hard thing. For me with the fan game, the easy answer I have that it's built in, right? If I was making an original game, it might be a lot harder. But since I'm making a Sonic fan game, I know that there's people that like Sonic. So I sort of have a built-in community out there that I can find on message boards and, Twitter. Just by being a Sonic fan on Twitter, the algorithm is feeding me Sonic stuff constantly. So it's sort of inherent to my interest that I get connected like that. And so I guess if you're making an original game, you got to think of what is your game most like and what fans of X will like my game, and sort of build that sort of community that way. That would be probably the advice I would give there. If you're starting off yourself, like I said, know what your strengths are, know what you're good at, and make something that can show your vision of where it's going. And the people that are interested in that and would like to be a part of that will probably find you if you can just get it out there.
Would you suggest then, with that in mind, would you suggest that people make a tech demo, would make a full-on game like how you have, to get attention from developers to use in their portfolio, or?
Yeah, so it's definitely. So there's sort of two answers about this, right? So I've yet to experience the negative side of this personally, but just having worked on a fan game for 5 years, obviously I've done a lot of research on fan games and what they can and can't do and that type of thing. I have had some people that said they've had negative experiences with fan games to where it's perceived as amateur and unprofessional. It's like, you didn't make a Sonic game, so why is there this weird random Sonic fake game in like your portfolio, right? It sort of depends on how the perspective is from the person receiving that, and sometimes that's out of your control. I do know this. I made a game, worked on it for 5 years, made it mostly by myself. It's been played internationally. It's had a crazy number of downloads. People are very positive about that. I don't see how that could possibly, hurt me on a resume, right? It's so hard in the game industry if you're applying for like jobs at a studio, people want you to have experience, but it's sort of that experience, what do they call it? This experience sort of paradox where you're like, I can't get experience unless I get a job. Jobs won't give me a job unless I have experience. So I'm like, I'm going to go make my own experience. And I did. It's like, okay, you won't let me make a game for you. I made a game myself. Here it is. A lot of people have played it, if they get caught up on the fact that it's Sonic, not too much I can do about that. But here's the deal. You will learn so much from it. And even if the fan game itself isn't necessarily something that lands you the jobs, the skills that you've learned will 100% benefit you. And getting motion out there, getting your name out there can't hurt you either, right? Like I only see this as a net positive, right? And you said making a tech demo or a full fan game, definitely make a decision on that, I would say too. Again, using the 80-20 rule, you could have got a pretty good amount of results if you had just made a really good looking one-level Sonic tech demo and made it under the guise of this is all this is going to be. It's just one level. and you could probably still get a lot out of that. And there's people that have done that. You don't have to be as crazy as me and spend 5 years making an entire full game and only to release it for free online. But you can definitely learn the benefits of making games through fan games and tech demos and things like that. 100%. If I did it, you can do it too.
Yeah, I definitely got to applaud you in that sense. It's an incredible thing that you've done, really, to take that amount of time out of your life to dedicate this game. Like you say, all the skills that you've learned, all the experiences that you've done. I mean, yes, you could make a one-level tech demo or whatever, but like you say, the limitations that you've worked and self-imposed limitations that you put yourself under just to then finish the entire game, to manage that project is another skill in itself. To manage all the other people that have been supporting you in terms of, from different things, that's another skill in itself. So the whole project, the whole game has taught you so many different skills that, you definitely earned the title of director, producer, everything, it's such a great thing. And I guess that means for me, really, like the next question really would be, what's next for you? Like, do you have another project that you're thinking of working on, another Sonic game or any other games, or have people been contacting you to, hey, come and work for us?
So for me, the way I see it is, it took 5 years to do this. You can get a bachelor's degree in around 4 or 5 years. So I like to think that I got a degree in making games from the school of just doing it, right? So for me, the release of this game and the incredible positive reception it's had that has blown me away is, I like to think that I set out on my goal and I'm graduating from fan games and I want to move on to original indie games. So I already have things in the works that I'm really excited to show y'all. Can't talk about quite yet, but it will be an original game with my own characters. Not a Sonic thing, not a fan game of any other series, but my own vision, my own characters. But if you like Sonic, you'll probably like it too. So that's what I would say for that.
Oh, that is good to hear. So how can people find out more about you then? Where can they find you? Where online should they find out the latest about Noah?
Well, the best place is probably my Twitter. I'm on there probably more than I should be, but it is at Noah in Copeland. There's also my Game Jolt page where if you download Sonic Triple Trouble, you see my Game Jolt page. That's where you get the game at, gamejolt.com, and then search for Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit. I post on there as well. You can play some smaller games I've made on some game jams as well before, if you're into that. But those would be the best places, my Twitter and my Game Jolt. I appreciate every single person that has played the game and just sent me messages and sent me comments and tweets that were just saying, hey, this is just a lot of fun. It made me smile. Thank you so much for making this game. That means the world to me, and that is awesome support. So thank you so much.
When you do release your future game, your own independent, your idea of a game, that people support you and they purchase that game, or however else you want to be able to do it, whether it be through another platform or whatever, that people should now have confidence. They should be inspired by Sonic Triple Trouble to know, hey, look, this is a Noah Copeland game. The way that people talk about people like Miyamoto or Kojima, like, hey, look, this is a Noah Copeland game. You've got to buy it. I've got to play it. So
yes, I got to put a Noah Copeland game, a game by Noah Copeland, just like 7 times on the title screen.
It's exactly what you should do.
Yeah,
but
I hope people stick around for it. I really do. I hope that made them go like, hey, this was really fun. I can't wait to have more fun.
I definitely think that would be the case. I've seen a lot of, I'm not like the biggest, sort of indie game player. I my time is so short of time these days as I'm getting older. But when I think of games like Axiom Verge, for example, like Tom Happ, I believe, is one guy making that game. People, I think it's just the second one's recently more released, and people are hopefully flocking to that game based on his his level design and his vision on that. I think there are other games in similar brackets that I can't even think about now, but it's hopefully there are a dedicated number of people that will follow you and continue to follow you to see what other things you come up with. And I think they'll probably be begging you for a Fang campaign, for Nack campaign for for the rest of your life.
Probably, yes.
Yeah. But no. Well, no, I really appreciate the time that you've taken out of your schedule to come and talk to me about Sonic. We could probably talk about Sonic for a really long period of time, even longer than we already have. And I would like to thank everyone who's watching as well. Go follow Noah on social media. If you haven't played the game yet, I strongly urge you to do so. I will mention that I actually played it on my Steam Deck and it worked fine. More than fine, it worked excellently. In fact, it's probably one of the best performing games on my Steam Deck because I seem to have some struggles with my Steam Deck. It's getting better though.
Yeah, but, I lucked into that for sure.
Yeah, do you know what? It was the game. It's the game that started making me fall in love with my Steam Deck a little bit more, because every game I've been playing on the Steam Deck, there's been some issue or another. Not every game.
That's
but
a
I
miracle
played
that mine and my programming is the one that works the best.
Hey, look, I mean, I enjoyed it. There are thousands of games on Steam. People are going to come at me in the comments. I already know this. But this is the game. When I think about my Steam Deck in the future, how we were talking about and reminiscing about the GameCube.
Yeah.
I'm going to think of my Steam Deck and think the first game that I played on hey, look, that was the game that really made the Steam Deck for me. It's got to be Sonic Triple Trouble. So.
That's awesome. It makes sense. It's like a really big Game Gear. So it's just...
Yeah, oh my word. I didn't even think about that.
Comes full circle.
It does come full circle. Well, no, thank you very much once again. And hey, look, guys, go and follow Noah. Go and play the game. I'll drop some links in the description below so you've got everything. But no, thank you very much. And well, that's everything. Take care. See you in the next video.